All right. So, hey, everybody, welcome. We are here with Chris Gimenez, and we are so excited that he's here. He's a guy I played against quite a bit, and I got to play with him in spring training for a year, so that was also a treat. Chris spent most of his time behind the plate as a catcher, but he was also very versatile. So you'd see him at first base on occasion, third base on occasion. You'd even see him running in the grass in the outfield and running balls down out there. And I guess just a little background on Chris. He was drafted in the 19th round out of University of Nevada, Reno by the Cleveland Indians in 2004.
Yes.
Yeah, a long time ago.
A long time ago.
Right, and he's from the garlic capital of the world, Gilroy, California. If you've ever driven through there, you know when you hit Gilroy because it smells like garlic.
That's exactly right. Home sweet home.
And so Chris has loads of experience, and we're excited to pick his brain. He played with 6 different organizations. He has over 6 years Major League service time, and he has parts of 10 different Major League seasons. And what we talked about before, that getting to the Major Leagues is really hard, and staying is even harder. And so being able to carve out that career is incredible. So congrats to you.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
So welcome again. And I just want to remind everyone that's watching this that the idea of these interviews is we want to spotlight players that have been at the highest level. And we want you to just realize that every path is different. Every journey is different. And that we want you guys that are just starting your path, or you're, a parent working with your kid, or a youth coach, that we want you to just hear from, some of the guys and what they did when they were young, some things they've learned along the way, and maybe you guys can use some of that for your own development. So that's kind of what we want to do. So let's get into it.
Sure.
Chris, the first thing I actually want to ask you about is, how do you pronounce your last name? Because I know that I may get harassed in some of the comments or emails if I –
Yeah. Believe it or not, I've been harassed my entire life about it. So I've actually had people on social media tell me that I need to embrace my Latin heritage, and I'm not Latin. So you get worn out about it, but you pronounce my name Jim, like basketball Jim, Gym. Yeah. That's the best way I've kind of learned how to tell people how to pronounce it. It's Gimenez. My family is originally from Spain. My great grandfather, I believe, came over. My grandfather was born here in the United States, obviously fathered myself and my son. So we are of Spanish descent. And I'm about as, bald white guy as you could possibly get. So,
all right. Well, that's good to know, especially I'm glad everyone else knows that. We got that cleared up before we get into it. So that's a good thing to get cleared up. So now I want to go into, let's just get right into it. Like, when you were younger, what was your favorite sports? Like, where did you grow up? And what sports did you play?
So it was cool. I had a wonderful neighborhood to grow up in. Obviously, like we talked about earlier, I grew up in Gilroy, California. Back then, Gilroy was a really, really small farming community. Obviously, a ton of garlic, a ton of artichokes. They're just a little tiny farming community. And it wasn't until I really left to go to college in the early 2000s was it kind of had a boom. That's when the Silicon Valley kind of blew up, and everybody kind of seemed to move down south into Gilroy area. But we had a wonderful street. I was actually the only kid my age on our street. I had kids 4 years older than me or 3 years younger than me. So I always chose to kind of play with the older kids. Nobody wants to go out there and play with the younger guys if you don't have to. But we literally played every sport you could imagine. We had the coolest thing. Like, we had spray painted baseball fields and basketball fields on our street, the actual street. Like, we would spray paint on the street and do it. And, we would go out every single night, every day during the summer. We'd be playing anything, hockey, roller hockey, basketball, baseball, football, ultimate Frisbee. We literally did everything we possibly could. And, I know we'll probably get into this a little bit more, but, I'm a really, really big believer in do everything as a kid. Like, it helps your body. It helps your mobility. It helps, you develop as an athlete, as just a human being in general, just being able to go out and learn how to make your body move in different directions, different ways, and keeping everything kind of synced up.
Right. And I think that's a great point. I mean, I'm a huge believer in playing multiple sports. And I always say, personally, I don't know what you think on it, but baseball is more of a skill-specific sport. You're not going to get crazy athletic from playing baseball.
Right.
But when you play tennis or soccer or football or whatever it is, that's going to help that's going to help create some athleticism that will translate over to baseball.
Absolutely. That lateral mobility, the hip explosion, stuff like that. These are things that, in baseball, they're integral parts of your game. And, the more you have a chance to kind of branch out and do those things in different types of sports and athletics, it's only going to help you for baseball specifically.
Right. Now, you were a catcher. I mean, that's what you did. That was your calling card. When did you start catching? Were you always a catcher? Did you play multiple positions? What did it look like when you were younger?
Yeah. So I grew up, I was a center fielder. I used to be skinny and fast, and that is not the case anymore, probably why I ended up being a catcher. But no, I grew up, I played all through high school. I was our center fielder. I think everybody in Little League either plays center field or shortstop pretty much, and maybe a little bit of first base. But I came up through high school, played center field. I rarely caught at all. I always wanted to be a catcher. Finally, my sophomore year of high school, my high school coach let me catch, and it actually I think I turned some heads a little bit with it. It's such a demanding position mentally, physically. I think this is probably the common misconception that nobody wants you to catch because they don't want you to get hurt, and I get that. You are putting yourself in harm's way a little bit more, especially as you climb the ladder and how good you can actually be at it. But having a chance to play center field, to play shortstop, those are very like side-to-side mobility type positions. Being an infielder your entire career, playing some outfield too, like you have to be able to get on the step, and you have to be able to beat the ball to a spot or read a hop or, guess in the outfield where that ball is going to land or, try to cut it off, stuff like that. So, I grew up, playing center field, playing shortstop. I had a chance to catch, and just happened to be that day that the scout that originally drafted me out of high school, who ended up drafting me again in college, saw that I could catch. I signed pro ball. I played outfield in college, never played anything but outfield. I was our center fielder and right fielder in college. Signed pro ball. They tried me out, a little bit at third base, first base, my first year in pro ball in short season, Mahoning Valley. I was pretty much dead even between three outfield positions, third base and first base. And it wasn't until my third year of pro ball that they decided, they were going to make me a catcher. And coming up in Cleveland's organization, we had Victor Martinez, who was the young stud. And, he had also had some versatility when he first got into pro ball. So I think it was something they kind of tried, and it ended up really being the best decision of my career. I took to it really well. I actually got sent back to A-ball the next year. I spent 2 years in low A, and that was really I got to catch every single day. I caught 140 games in 142 games of a minor league season. Wow. So it was cool, and whether it was, I didn't necessarily start, but I came in at some point. I just had the opportunity to go back there and learn everything by failing. I failed miserably multiple times, but thankfully for me, one of the big calling cards I think that I've had in my career is I've been a student of the game. So I would write stuff down. I would learn from my mistakes, from other people's mistakes. And it was just an incredible learning experience. So that's really how I became a catcher, was 2006. They just kind of told me the first day of spring training that, hey, here's a catcher's glove, go learn how to do it. So there we go.
Well, it sounded like, maybe not half the battle, but it's just embracing it and being okay with change. Absolutely. And being willing to give it a try. So I think that's cool. But I also know you're a versatile player. I saw you play all over a diamond, so do you think playing multiple positions helped elongate your career? And do you recommend that with young kids?
Oh, yes. Play as many positions as you guys can. Not only is it good for you in regards to being flexible on a roster, when you have to have a certain amount of guys on a roster, the more positional flexibility you have, the easier it makes for the decision makers, to have you want to be on that team, because you cover so many different spots in that ball club. And I'm referring a little bit more towards pro ball in that regard. But, I think it helped me. My main goal was to try to act like a shortstop, but behind the plate. I wanted to be soft. I wanted to be quick, to be able to move side to side or explode out of your squat, to whether you're throwing the ball to second base or you're making a block. And no doubt in my mind, that really helped me. But I do agree 100% with you. I think, I've seen other teams try to do this to players, and they want no part of it. I was very open to the idea, and I wanted any way possible I could possibly get to the big leagues. And it turns out I'm right-handed and I'm not left-handed, so I couldn't be a left-handed pitcher. So catching was kind of the next best option. So I decided to kind of jump in, feet first and just really try to embrace it.
Right. I think that's a really good point. I mean, and I think you did make a smart decision and not try to throw left-handed. So
yeah.
So did you play, I mean, growing up in Gilroy, I know it was different when we grew up and stuff, and travel teams weren't quite as prevalent, but did you play on travel teams growing up, or did you play year round?
Yeah. So actually we didn't have any travel ball teams in the area until my junior year of high school. I got invited to go to the area code games. I was very, very lucky in that regard that I made the team, had a chance to go and do that. And that was really the first experience I had of playing any baseball in the summer. My junior year, I got to go to the area code games. We actually created also from scratch. We had I forget exactly what they call it, but it was a summer league, but it was derived of basically like 5 high schools in our area, in our localized area. And it was just something that all of the coaches in the area kind of got together and were like, listen, let's have a chance. There's nothing like this around. Let's create some teams that we could have some guys go out and just play each other on the backfields, not really take it too serious. So that was really my only experience I had was, playing. That was my travel ball experience was, going to our hated rival high school and playing their kids during the summer, and then having a chance to go to the area code games. So nowadays I just feel like it's become like, it's just become something that I don't think it was necessarily intended to be. Like I said, kids need to be kids. They need to have breaks. I understand wanting to do it, and there's no denying that it doesn't help in some regards. But having a chance to go have a sleepover at your buddy's house, or go to over the hill to play a tournament for the next 4 days, let a kid have a chance to grow up and have fun and just be a kid. I was a big fan of that. I think that helped me tremendously. And in not really getting burnt out on it, because I think that's what you see these days is, sometimes parents have a tendency to live vicariously through their kids. They didn't have that kind of thing when they were a kid, so they're going to make it or force their kid, to do that kind of thing. And it might not be what the kid wants to do.
Right. It's hard enough in pro ball playing 162 games, being at the yard every day, spring training and all that. And then if you're asking a 10-year-old, 11-year-old to do that, that can be pretty tough. And I think you hit it on the head. I mean, it seems like that's why maybe there's a lot of kids that burn out around the age 12, 13. Right. And so, I think that's a good point. Be kids, play a bunch of sports and have fun, like it's not a job at that point.
You don't know what you're going to like,
Right.
Nobody's telling you have to like baseball. Like, for us, I think it was natural. That's just something, we love the game of baseball. And there's so many kids out there that do. But some kids also like basketball. They like soccer, and if you're not ever given that opportunity to play those things, how are you ever going to find that out?
Right. I think it's a great point. So, like, when did things start to turn for you? Like, when did you decide to be all in on baseball? And you're like, okay, I think maybe there's a chance for me to be able to play beyond high school, and hope, I don't know where you thought your end goal was, but, when were you all in on baseball and what did that look like?
The funny thing is, from the age of 2, all I ever wanted to do was be a Major League Baseball player. That's all I ever talked about. That was just my thing. That's what I wanted to do. And it also turns out basketball was probably my best sport before, I really kind of got serious about baseball. But it turns out there's not too many 6'1" white centers in the NBA. And I realized really quickly that, baseball was going to be, once I got to my junior year of high school, I'd say was pretty, then I knew what I wanted to do. I was getting some scholarship offers already my sophomore year. Turning into my junior year, I ended up signing early with the University of Nevada. And I think it was probably my junior year that I really kind of just decided that, I'm going for it. And that's the only thing I've ever wanted to do was be a Major League Baseball player. At that point, I still happened to be better at basketball than I was at baseball, but I kind of, I went, like I said, I just went feet first and I went for it.
Right. And you were an accurate self-evaluator. I mean, sometimes.
Yeah, thank you.
So now, what I want to know too is when did you start lifting weights? I know everyone kind of starts different, when they start lifting weights. And also, moving to your pro career, what did the weightlifting, strength and conditioning look like, and what helped you perform on the field?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great question. I was very thankful. I grew up pretty much on a ranch when I was a kid. My family had, about 150 head of cattle. So my first real experience to weightlifting was 8 years old, and I'm out throwing hay bales around. And that's not every kid's dream, or nor is that something that every kid gets to do. But growing up on the ranch, I really was out there with my grandfather, both of them, just kind of working, doing odd jobs on the ranch, hauling hay. It really wasn't until my junior year of high school that I started lifting weights. We didn't have any weights or anything like that at my high school. Our football team, which I did not play, but they had to go off site to go to a weight room it was like a 24-hour fitness or something like that they had to go 3 times a week, so that was kind of the really only the weight room. There was only one weight room in the city of Gilroy at that point in time too. So, it wasn't something that was really readily accessible. But my junior year, myself and 5 of my baseball teammates, we bought, month passes to the 24-hour fitness and kind of went in there, and, it was very rudimentary, honestly. Even in college, it was, you're doing dumbbell bench press. You're doing
press and curls, baby.
Yeah, that's right, baby. That's what you do, Got to look good in your uniform. So, once I got to pro ball, things started to be a little bit more dynamic. But even then, early on, in the first probably 2 or 3 years of pro ball, it was still very, just kind of barbaric, rudimentary workouts. Where you're squatting, you're deadlifting, or you're doing some sort of press movement. You know what I mean? And I think it wasn't until, it really hasn't been until the last probably 5 or 6, maybe 7 years that weightlifting and just movements, body movements in general, have become so much more prevalent, and it's something that's studied in the game, and I think back in the day too, we had turkey or ham sandwiches that had been sitting there for however many days, in a cooler, and that was the only thing you had to eat. Nowadays, even A-ball teams are having catered meals because organizations are starting to realize how important fueling your body is, refueling your body, eating the right types of food. They're starting to invest more in the player and the training side of it and the nutrition side of it. And I think you're starting to see, I think that's part of the reason we're seeing some of these, Mike Trouts when they're in the big leagues at 22 and they're the best player in the game, Bryce Harper's, Manny Machado's, and just young kids that are at the highest possible level, playing at their peak level, because their eyes have been open to how well you can eat, how you can refuel your body, how the training aspect, it makes you so much more dynamic, whether it's lateral movements, or explosions from the hips. Like those are, I'm going to probably bring that up multiple times just because, that's something that's so important in the game that, it's not just doing biceps. Like, yes, we want to do that because it looks cool. And we all want to have big biceps in our uniforms because maybe they won't throw you strikes, but you have to do some other movements. And sometimes it's those little muscles that, I think they're just starting to get realized that make a big, big difference.
That's a great point. I mean, the strength and conditioning is more than just getting in the weight room and lifting. It's about, how you fuel your body. And that's a good point. It really is. I mean, it becomes a full-time job, and being accountable and taking care of yourself.
That's right. Yeah. Especially in the off season, when there's nobody there to kind of babysit you, during the season, whether you're in the big leagues or in A-ball, there's always a strength and conditioning coach there. They're forcing you to work out, not forcing you, but, they're making sure you get your workouts in, you're working the right way, you're getting your recovery in. That's something that's also become so much more prevalent these days, is the recovery aspect of it. You know what I mean? And the food and the nutrition part of that goes a long way with it. But now we're starting to see, different companies come out with like a Normatec, which is a device that you can put on your arm or your legs, and it constricts, it pumps air into this boot or sleeve that you wear on your arm, and it constricts your body and basically helps blood flow circulate to the areas you have the sleeves on. Those things were non-existent even 3 years ago. It was something that, so all this stuff has really come out to really help you recover, get yourself back and ready to play, because really the only day you feel 100% is the first day of spring training. And then about 2 hours into that first day, you go down to about 70% real quick.
That is the truth. And I know about those Normatec boots. I lived in those my last season I played.
Oh, yeah.
After every game, I was
Oh yeah,
strapped up in those things.
Normatec and Ice Tub. That's a game changers.
They are. Now, what are some obstacles? I know that probably your path all throughout up to the major leagues and even in the major leagues, I mean, it wasn't a straight path. It wasn't an easy path. So what are some obstacles that you faced, and how did you overcome them?
I think it was a good obstacle, but having a position change, learning on the fly how to become a catcher in pro ball, that can be looked at. I took it as a challenge. It definitely was an obstacle just because it ended up being the greatest decision of my career. But, I had to go through those trials and tribulations of learning the position, knowing that they're trading for other guys who are these stud prospects because our team wasn't that great in the big leagues. So they're, doing what every team does now and rebuilding, and having to deal with some of those shortcomings and having guys that are ahead of you, getting traded or getting traded to your organization. But, I think the biggest thing was just really kind of grinding it out and learning how to become a professional and how to become a professional catcher. I think those were two of the bigger hurdles I had in my career. And I was always that person that I wouldn't accept no for an answer. And, they told us when we first got to pro ball, we're sitting there, they have organization, all of the coordinators are stuff are in town. We had a little 3-day mini camp the first day. You're kind of meeting everybody. It's the first time you're really getting a chance to, there's our second rounder, there's our third rounder. These guys that have got a lot of money. And I'm in the 19th round. I didn't get very much money. So you just wanted an airline ticket and a chance to go play. And, you're having this chance to kind of meet all these guys and see what they're all about. And, they told us, they sat us down and said, listen, the reality is, there were 50 guys drafted from the Cleveland Indians in 2004. Said the reality is 2, maybe 3 of you guys, will ever make it to the big leagues. And I remember I was sitting directly across from our first rounder, Jeremy Sowers at the time. And I looked at him, I'm like, hey bro, I'm making it. I don't know about you. Like, I just had that attitude. So there, the little injuries or the things that might have set you back, I never dwelled on that kind of stuff. Getting sent back to A-ball, learn how to be a catcher. I didn't dwell on it. I took it as a challenge and tried to learn and just, be myself, but try to do exactly what they needed me to do.
I think that's a great point. Like the mental side of it, being mentally tough, but also believing in yourself, because you'll find at times that sometimes you almost feel like you're the only person that believes in yourself, and
multiple times.
Right. And you have to remain strong. You have to have that belief that you can do it, even when times are not easy, you're not going well. You feel like that everyone thinks you can't play. You still got to have that desire and that belief that you can make it.
Yeah. I mean, there was not one point in my career until this last, about 3 months ago when I decided I was going to retire. That was the only point in my career where I ever had those thoughts. I mean, you might think, you're going through some tough times, whether it be, a bad stretch at the plate or defensively or whatever, where, I'm like, God, I suck. I need to I have to do something to figure this out. Or, a lot of guys have family troubles too. I mean, I have 3 kids and a wife who are the greatest things ever. It's when they're not out there with you, it puts that extra bit of stress on you. Your wife's struggling at home. These are all extracurricular things that have nothing to do with baseball, but they're all hurdles to overcome. It takes a very special woman, and thankfully I found one of those. My college sweetheart, she's still with me. She hasn't kicked me to the curb yet because I played baseball for 15 years in the professional ranks. So those are all little hurdles that you have to overcome. But not once did I ever have those thoughts creep into my head, because we've both seen it. How many guys that we see athletically from a baseball standpoint have all the talent in the world that never really made it anywhere because, they didn't have what it took between their ears. And that's a really, really big part of it.
Right. And I think that's a big thing that goes maybe unmentioned or unnoticed at times. And I think that you're right. That's so important, because there are players that were a whole lot better than we were that never got close to the major leagues.
Right.
And so, all that, I think all that is great. So that's some really good stuff. Now, I want to go into some drills. We get a lot of questions asked drills. So do you have any offensive drills, hitting drills that you used to do, or that maybe you've seen some kids do that you just thought were awesome and that you've actually seen some improvement from them?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I've always been a really big proponent of hips, from a catching standpoint to a hitting standpoint. A lot of the basic movements are very, very similar. And this is something that I'm starting to get a little bit more into. It's how your body works for itself. And I mean this in the way that, okay, so I used to do a lot of hip work because I was a catcher, and it was more stretching stuff. You know what I mean? To be able to put your body in the right position to block a ball or to be able to throw a ball to second base. A lot of those movements, believe it or not, are the same as the hitting type of movement. When you go to throw, they're very, very similar movements. So from a hip perspective and standpoint, I used to do a lot of hip explosion drills. You know what I mean? Where I'm holding, even if it's a 5-pound medicine ball, and I'm on my knees and I'm exploding my knees up and cycling my legs underneath and landing down. That was one thing that really kind of took me to the next level. And that's kind of funny, but not that I was always very athletic, but I kind of really got to the next level once my hips kind of opened up. I think I was really, really tight in there, which most people don't realize they are. You might have some back pain, or your elbow might even be hurting because your hips are off. And that's something that, it got brought to my attention about 5 years ago. And I think if you look at my career track record, about 5 years ago is when I actually started becoming like, oh, wow, this guy can actually play a little bit and not just, a bum. But I was big into the hips. So every time, we talk about drills and stuff to do, like, yes, you can hit off the tee, you can block as many balls as you want. You can play catch a certain way, but everything kind of revolves from the ground up. And, whether it's hitting or defensively, when we're talking about taking ground balls, we want to go low to high, right? You want to stay down on the ball. You don't want to lift up because then balls might go between your legs. It's the same thing when we're hitting. We want to get down in our legs and explode your hips from there. So I think really the biggest thing is hip stretches, hip explosion, any type of stuff you can do for that. You would be just blown away with what you could actually do in your career from maybe a hitting standpoint. If your hips are working the right way, your swing might be just fine, but your lower half's not allowing you to get to a spot you need to get to. And if you can get to that point where your hips are opening up, wow, I can create some space now between my legs and my hands. Oh, dude, look, oh my God, I hit that ball 500 feet. Like, where did that come from? So that was something that, again, I think it's really overlooked, and it's starting to get a little bit more prevalent because, we're talking about, I'm sure you had this, especially in the later part of your career, because this is when I started noticing was every team had a movement screen, whether it was an FMS training or a, screen, or it was some sort of movement training screen. So they want to see how your body moves. And a lot of that is derived from your hips. I feel like I'm beating a dead horse with the hip thing. And people are probably looking at me like, why is this guy so into hips? But you'd be surprised with the type of movement you can get out of your body that you never knew you had.
Well, that's really interesting. So you felt like your hitting got better, not from hitting off a tee or doing one-arm drills or high tee, but from actually just working on the flexibility and the strength and the explosiveness of your hips.
Yes.
Wow.
That was the biggest thing was I was always, for a lot of years, I was a big upper body swinger. You swing with your shoulders. And a lot of that was because my hips were so tight, because I was learning how to be a catcher. I'm putting my body in different positions that it wasn't used to being in. So now, once I've kind of identified that, like, dang, man, I'm tight here. Like, why can't I get to be able to, they always talk about when you're hitting, I like giving the idea of it too, but you want to create that space, and you want to be short to it and long through it, right? That's what every hitting coach you've ever heard says. Well, I was not able physically to be long through it. I was short to it and short through it. And that was a big problem of mine. And it wasn't until I really learned how to get my hips to kind of loosen up and be able to now have the flexibility in my hips to be able to fire those bad boys and keep that bat lag behind me, that I could start shooting the ball the other way. I would get lucky, and if you threw it in the right spot, I was going to hit it a long way. And that was kind of my calling card for a few years. But it wasn't until I really learned how to, have that hip flexibility, the hip movements going in the right direction, that I started to become a little bit more of a complete hitter. I started laying off pitches that normally I would have swung at, because, I know now, like, how to get to a pitch, but I also know that I can't hit that pitch or do anything with it. You know what I mean? And that really kind of started taking my career in the trajectory. And I was able to stick around in the big leagues a lot longer, just because of my hips being put in the right place, basically.
Wow, that's great. So now, is it different for throwing, or do you think the hips still make a big impact in that? Like, how would you like?
I've been doing a study on this, believe it or not.
Okay.
Whole last year, we're starting to find that, in the major leagues, everybody's enamored with guys that can throw 100. And it seems like, when we came up to, when we first got to the big leagues and or in pro ball, we still had that average white righty, right? Where the guy was 92 miles an hour. He threw it straight. That's not something that you see in this day and age of baseball. Even at a young age in high school, kids are throwing 100 miles an hour. If you threw 92 miles an hour in high school when I was there, you were like, wow, that was big time. And now we're seeing kids consistently throwing 100 plus miles an hour. And a lot of that is derived from, the training aspect of it, because kids are getting a little bit more exposed earlier on in their baseball lives or journeys, to certain types of movements. But you're talking about, your scat flexibility, like all of these things that are allowing these people to throw astronomical miles an hour. Like, it just blows me away that, these kids are having the ability to do that. And I think it's so much more of a prevalent part of the game. And it just blows me away. I'm like thankful that I got out of it now, because, now I don't have to hit a 93 mile an hour cutter anymore. Like that's the happiest day of my life.
I'm the same way. I feel like when I first got in there, you might see one guy in a whole league that would throw 95 miles an hour. Now you got 4 or 5 in the bullpen of every single team.
Single team. Yeah.
Yeah. It's crazy. Like how hard people are throwing. So, okay. So now what about, we all know that obviously, lighting up the radar gun is important. People like that. Evaluators like it. Teams like it. Right. But in reality, it's not really effective unless you can throw strikes.
Absolutely.
So this isn't just for pitchers, but this is just for all throwers. How would you, if you were working with a kid or someone, how would you help improve their throwing accuracy?
Yeah. So I think, one thing that I really feel like gets overlooked is, I've seen a lot of travel ball teams in the area here. We constantly hear about, oh, you got to paint down and away. You got to paint down and away. And I think at an early age, a lot of times guys get so worried about throwing it right on the corner and right on the corner. And the reality is, guys, even the best guys in the big leagues miss in the heart of the plate. The key to it is, the key that those guys are so good in the big leagues is because they can get you out on the plate and off the plate. You know what I mean? They have the ability and the stuff that helps too. But throwing strikes wise, pound the zone. You're never going to be hurt by pounding the zone. If you're 91 miles an hour and right down the middle up, okay, I don't recommend that, but if we can learn to pound the zone early, as from a catching standpoint, our whole goal is always to start at this part of the plate. If you can get strike one, then you can move here, then you can move here, then you can move here. You know what I mean? Instead of trying to start strike one here, oh, there's ball one, there's ball two. Now I have to come here. In the big leagues, that stuff doesn't fly. You know what I mean? It doesn't fly in high school. Guys can hit the ball that's down the middle. But the more a pitcher can attack the zone, the better off he's going to be. I mean, he's just going to be able to use all of his weapons as opposed to having to shell a couple of them because he can't throw strike one. And now we're putting ourselves in a tough spot.
Right. So basically, I mean, for pitchers, it's to not be afraid, stay ahead, stay in pitchers counts, don't get in hitters counts.
Hitting is hard, guys. Hitting is hard. Yes, every time you turn on MLB Network or ESPN, you see guys hitting balls 500 feet. But you know what? Okay, it's going to happen. You have to, first of all, if you can put that in your head, hey, I'm going to give up some home runs. It's going to happen, so I might as well turn the page and move on, right? They don't show the times that, the guy makes an incredible 0-1 pitch or 1-0 pitch to get himself back in the count that ended up striking the guy out. You know what I mean? Like, those are the things, are just not being that bulldog out there, not being afraid to pound the zone. That's one of the greatest battles in a game of baseball, is that mano a mano, like me versus you. Here it comes. That's part of the game that I love the most. It's just that competition. I know you're challenging me and I'm trying to challenge you. And then we're going to go to war, and here we go. But not be afraid to throw strikes. I mean, walks, like strikeouts are even more prevalent now. Like, it's going to happen, guys. You're going to strike out. You're going to give up home runs. So just get used to it. Not be afraid to shy away from it. Don't pitch away from contact, pitch to it.
That's a great point. I mean, it really is. So that's great stuff for young pitchers. Now, I want to talk about catching a little bit and
Sure.
go into that. So young catchers, let's say they want to strap it up for the first time, or they just, guys are just wanting to catch, want to get behind the plate. What are some responsibilities that catchers have that may be different from, all the other position players?
Yeah, I think, first and foremost is you have to be the rock. You're the field general out there. You're the only one that can see where everybody's lined up. Okay. So you have to be that rock. If you're out there and you're just learning how to catch, and we see it all the time, you see it in the big leagues still, guys' body language sometimes can be terrible, and nobody feeds off that body language more than the pitcher. So I think really being that rock for that guy, even when things aren't going well, is sometimes the best mound visits I've ever had. You go out there and you say something so off the wall that it gets that guy to stop thinking for that split second about what he's doing wrong, and is able to lock back in. You know what I mean? But if I was to go out there and be like, oh, what are we going to do now? Like, nothing's working today. So, that doesn't go very well for a lot of those guys out there. And I think just having that accountability, that willingness to be the rock, to be the guy, that you're kind of working the shadows, so to speak. You do all of the grunt work, then you don't get a lot of credit for it. So you have to be humble, and you have to really be accountable and be the rock. Like, that's one of the most important things about being a catcher, is I love the fact that, you can go out there and do something perfect and nobody knows about it. You know what I mean? As opposed to, you see a guy make a great play in center field diving. That's awesome. Don't get me wrong. That's his job. That's not my job to do. If I can go back there, be a solid force behind the plate, and kind of be seen, and, just kind of be heard, but not really be seen, and have all that stuff, and have my pitchers want to throw to me every day, there's not a better compliment in baseball.
I kind of love how you said that. I mean, pitchers, at times they can be on an island by themselves, and especially if things aren't going well, they might feel alone out there. So kind of being that confidence for them, if for some reason they lose their confidence for a little bit, I think is really important.
Oh,
so
yeah.
I think that's a great point. Now, you've been a great catcher and throughout your career, and you've been around a lot of great catchers. What would be like 3 characteristics or traits of elite catchers?
Yeah, I think especially nowadays, the receiving aspect of it is no doubt, it's one of the biggest things in the game right now that, people are starting to come up with metrics for how you can add value to a team just from your receiving, or your framing, as everybody calls it. That would probably be first and foremost. I think this is going to sound funny, but I'm a very traditional catcher. I believe in your job is to get the best out of that pitcher. Doesn't matter who's on the mound on that given day. It does not matter if you go 4 for 4 or 0 for 4. You have to be, like I said, the rock. You cannot show emotion. You can't take your at-bats out to the field with you. No doubt, like, you see it, we all have seen it happen, and we've all done it too. It's part of that maturation process, and understanding yourself, and learning, how to play the position at an elite level. So I really think, separating the two of those, your offense and your defense, it will go a long, long way. And especially nowadays in today's game. And I think really lastly is your ability to control the running game. You see all these good catchers, these elite catchers, they have such quick feet and quick hands. A lot of that is derived from just doing those types of drills, and taking onus and taking pride in the fact that I don't care who's on first base, if it's Billy Hamilton or if it's, Chris Gimenez, nobody's going to steal second on me. I always took a ton of pride in that. And, if they do steal second, to not blame it on the pitcher, have that accountability to like, okay, that's all right. I'm going to give you one. Next time we go, I need to do this a little bit quicker, or I need to make a better throw, or, whatever the case may be, is really taking that ownership of everything that you do out there.
I think that's really cool. And the thing that kind of jumps out at me was when you were talking about controlling the running game, you didn't talk about arm strength or throwing the ball as hard as you get. You were talking about quick feet, transition. quickness. That's something that people can improve on. That's something kids can work on. Like, you don't need to be able to throw the ball 95 miles an hour down to second base. I think I heard some of the elite catchers are throwing the ball like 80. I think the ball's coming out at like 83.
Right.
So, I mean, I think that's great how you focused on that, the quickness and stuff. And this is things that catchers can work on to get better, to bring down that pop time and throw more runners out.
Yes. So, I mean, that's something that, like you said, it's so overlooked because everybody, the media, I feel like nowadays, they always bring out the flashy and rightfully so. People want to see that stuff, but it's the little nuances that can help you out the most. You know what I mean? Like, yes, everybody, it would be great if we all had absolute bazookas. You know what I mean? But my body's different from your body. I didn't have an arm like you had an arm, or you didn't have one like I did. You know what I mean? So I had to figure out the best way to make myself as successful and as consistent as I possibly could. The quicker my feet were going to be, the quicker I could get the ball in my hand. And then you can't throw anybody out until you can get the ball in your hand. So it doesn't matter how good your arm is. If you can't get your feet and your body and your hand, the ball in your hand in the right way, you're not going to throw anybody out. Right. So those are little things that you can work on a daily basis in your house. You can do little drills that can help really kind of, get those quick feet going and keep your feet sped up with your hands.
Right. I think this might be a good question for you because you started to work on catching a little bit later in your career. But I mean, are there some common catching mistakes that maybe you yourself had that are, mechanically that you had to overcome, or things that maybe you see with some young catchers too, that you're like, hey, that might need to improve, and, before you can, continue working up the ranks?
Yeah, that's an incredible question. And especially for somebody who plays multiple positions and wasn't just a catcher. I came from playing predominantly a little bit of infield where you have a little bit of a shorter arm motion, but mostly outfield where your arm motion is a lot longer. And that was one of the biggest things for me. That was one of the toughest things to learn, was to be able to take it from where I'm throwing a ball this way in the outfield where I have an extremely long arm motion because I'm trying to get the ball in the air and let it fly and carry, to where now I have to be short and quick. And it took a long time, a lot of practice of just kind of basically learning how to transfer everything at the center line of my body. As to oppose in the outfield, you're coming here, you're off to the side of the ball, or whichever way the ball is taking you, if it's to the right or left, you're never receiving or transferring that ball from the same spot. You know what I mean? Because you're running in different directions in the outfield. Same thing from the infield. Very rarely do you ever, transfer the ball from the same location, I guess you could say. Mm-hmm. From a catching standpoint, that's one of the most imperative things, is being able to consistently get that ball in the right spot. You know what I mean? So now your arm can go to work for you. And then just really trying to, the better times I had were when I was more consistent at keeping the ball off the center line of my body. If I pushed it back, now my feet are ahead of my arm, and now I'm really in a bad spot because I'm trying to get my arm back out in front so I could get the ball out, and get that good backsman carry. So, really the arm motion in general was a big fight for me, and it took me a good while. And I really honestly didn't start getting really good at it until probably 5 or 6 years ago, just because I had to learn my body too all over again, from playing another position. I learned to, even when I was in the outfield, I would shorten my arm motion up a little bit to keep it as similar as I could, to where now I'm not throwing one time like this and the next time like this, because it's putting a ton of different stresses on your arm or the rest of your body too. So I tried to, and able to stay healthy and be able to go back there and do what I needed to do. I also needed to make sure I threw very consistently. Excuse me.
Right. Now, I know the catching position is unique. I mean, and some of the smartest guys I've ever played with were catchers. And I think that's just the focus on, they're not just worried about playing defense, but they have to worry about, working with the pitcher. They also have to worry about, hitting, and they have to worry about all the stuff that goes along with their own position as well. So they're working, straight up with the manager and pitching coach. So there's a lot of moving parts there to being a catcher. Now, with that being said, do you feel like that being a catcher, that maybe opportunities kind of started to open up? I mean, maybe, now that you're done playing, that maybe wouldn't have been there if you weren't a catcher or maybe playing a different position?
I definitely think there's something to that. Not that I would say you would still have opportunities, but I do think playing this specific position, and you have to be able to create relationships being back there, whether it's working with the pitcher, pitching coach, manager, umpires, that's a big part of it, is creating those relationships. You think back when you played, all of the guys who never had good rapport with either a pitching staff or an umpire, how quickly those guys were kind of out of the game, and I think just from a communication skill standpoint, and then not only that, but like seeing the field from a different perspective, I can see where everybody's at, and you can see all of the moving parts, whether you're having to take it from pitching staff or, going out to the mound and being able to calm a guy down, to now I have to go back to the behind the plate or at the plate and try to get a job done, whether it's, moving a runner over or getting on base or drawing a walk or, whatever the case may be. I think that is probably the main reason why most guys, there's so, like you said, there's so many moving parts. There's so many things in any given second that are going through your mind, and you stop thinking about it, and I think that's what you see in a manager. We always hear catchers make the best managers. And I think, that may or may not be true, but I want to say yes, because I'm a catcher and hopefully that's what I get to do someday, is manage, because that's the end goal. But, I think it's really the truth, because, they're able to deal with so many different things in so little amount of time, and be able to do it seamlessly. You know what I mean? And just being able to communicate everything. You have to be a good communicator back there. And I think, the good managers that I've had have been tremendous communicators.
Right. I mean, and I've noticed the same thing. Like the best catchers that I've, had the chance to play with were great communicators. And you're right. They were always thinking about things. And that's something that I guess when you first get in the game, you kind of get used to. Like that's what you have to do. That's some of your job responsibilities. And
right.
You have to get used to it. You have to get good at it, or you're out,
That's right.
And so, Now, going back to like your perspective behind the plate, okay, you're a catcher behind the plate. You have seen a lot of really good hitters. So What is one thing that sticks out to you that makes a hitter difficult to pitch to?
Yeah, I think, his ability to adjust at the plate. When you create a scouting report for a guy, like, okay, I'm going to make a rundown, I'm able to go watch video. And this is exactly how I'm going to attack this guy. This is how I'm going to start him, how I'm going to go to where I'm going to go to get strike two. And this is how I'm going to finish the guy. The toughest hitters in the game are able to foul off some of the best pitches that you can throw until you can make a mistake. They're adjusting to what you're doing in real time. You know what I mean? And I also think that goes both ways. With some of the best catchers I've ever seen have been able to, kind of understand, like, wow, we have a game plan started out this way for this guy. And I've seen so many pitches on video or I've seen so many pitches from him in the past where he's always a first pitch breaking ball taker. Well, we go ahead and flip that breaking ball up there and he hits it 450 feet because he's now making an adjustment. I have to make an adjustment back to it. You know what I mean? So I just think the best hitters are able to make adjustments as quick as possible. And I think, the elite hitters, those guys have the ability to do that. But even your everyday major leaguer, I mean, those guys, they're really, really good at spoiling good pitches, making the pitcher work, as opposed to letting the pitcher's stuff work for him and the guy gets himself out. And just I'm amazed with some of the hitters these days that are so young that just have an idea of what you're doing. And I think the video aspect of it, has a lot to do with it. You know what I mean? Because they can now study the pitcher and the catcher just like we can study the hitter. But, the ability to foul stuff off and change the at-bat from pitch to pitch is such a big, big part of that.
Right. Now, also kind of staying on the same line, like watching hitters, what is one area that might be common, especially with young hitters? I mean, and this might go like below pro ball. This might be like high school or youth ball or whatever. But what would be an area that mechanics might break down on a hitter where that might create some problems down the road when they face better pitching?
Right. Yeah, I think your backside, without a doubt. Your backside or your front shoulder would probably be the two biggest things. I think especially down at even in little leagues and stuff like that, a lot of the times, the kids haven't grown yet, and you start doing things. I actually was working with a kid in our facility 2 days ago, and we were talking about this exact thing, that his body isn't necessarily, he can't control his body yet like I can control mine or you can control yours, right? So the bat kind of swings the body in that regard. And it's not so much, that it's a bad swing or he's, his backside's not spinning. That has a lot to do with it. But if you can put your body in the right position, even at a young age, and learn how to do that, the better off you're going to be, the better off you're going to be able to make adjustments as you kind of get older and get higher up, in whatever level you're playing baseball at. But, I think the biggest thing we see a lot of times is kids swing with their upper body and they never really get their lower half, their backside into the baseball. If you look at all of the elite hitters in baseball, they're not squashing the bug when they're spinning on their backside. They're getting off their backside, using their hips and exploding towards the ball. It's really creating that kind of that rubber band, like where you're stretching that rubber band and then letting it eat. You know what I mean? And that's really what creates the violence of hitting. And I think that's something that a lot of the young kids, they don't really understand how to create that yet. You know what I mean? They're still working into their bodies. They're learning their bodies, and they're just, they're basically, their body only tells them how to do it one way because that's the only physical way their body can do it. So, a lot of times we just see it as from the backside and being a little bit more of an upper body swinger, just like I was when I was younger.
Right. So when you're talking about backside and front shoulder, specifically, you're talking with backside, you're talking about creating energy and force with the backside. Right. And then is front shoulder more like direction, or you more see guys pull out with
you're pulling because, a lot of kids they're not strong enough yet to be able to use their hands to swing the bat. So their first movement to get the bat to go forward is yanking this way. You know what I mean? And if that becomes natural, like it did for me when I was a kid, you're going to struggle at times with people that can consistently either throw the ball away or throw breaking balls, consistently in or out of the zone. You're going to struggle with those types of pitches. So, I think really, like we talked about, just that backside is really kind of what derives all the rest of this. But the two times you see it is just really kind of getting stuck back there or not using it at all. And then that kind of creates an upper body type swinger.
Right. And like I know now it's different when we were coming up and growing up, but analytics are huge. Yes. Bat sensors are huge. All that data that we're getting now as hitters has become a really important part of the game. Now, knowing that, what do you still think, like if you're working with a younger kid, what do you think is one important skill that young hitters need to develop and spend their time to, their energy focusing on?
Right. I really think it's making sure that you're putting your body in the best possible position for you to be successful. You can take a million swings, and the thing is, a lot of times we see kids do this. We see dads make their kids do this. Like, we got to keep hitting. We got to keep hitting. We got to keep throwing. When our bodies are not working for us, they're working against us. You know what I mean? It doesn't matter if you're 8 years old or you're 38 years old. If you can put your body in the right positions, you're going to be successful in this game. And the technology is awesome. Don't get me wrong. I mean, we love the technology. There's so many cool things you can do with it. But the thing we always like to say is it's movement over technology. If you cannot move the correct way, the technology does no good for you. So you can get all these cool bat sensors and all this stuff, but if you don't know how to use it and use your body in the right ways to get the information out of it, it's absolutely pointless. So I think the biggest thing I'm big on is really just getting kids to understand, like, if we can get your bodies to move in certain ways, and everybody's different. That's the cool part about our game, is we all don't hit the same. There's some different batting styles and stances out there. And the more you can get your body to be in the correct position, it doesn't matter if you stand backwards. You know what I mean? As long as when that ball's come, you're in the right position to get your body going forward in the right direction, you're going to have a chance to hit the ball.
Right. I think that's a great point. And so now we've just got a few more questions for you before we get on out of here. But now I want to this always kind of intrigued me a little bit. I've been on some teams that were close, tight-knit, that I think played above their means. And then I've actually been on teams that were the opposite.
I agree.
So, like, kind of, what do you think? Like, you've been on a bunch of teams and been with a bunch of players. What makes for a good teammate? What makes for a good leader?
Yeah, so that incredible question. A good leader is somebody who can take the worst of times and make them all of a sudden the best. You have to have humility. You have to be able to, when the tough times come, you have to be able to, if you need to go out to the pitching mound and you need to get into somebody out there, you have to know when to do it. And you have to also know when you have to go out there and, hey, sometimes maybe it's not the right time to go blow somebody up. I'm going to let them cool down a little bit. If he just came into the dugout, we can go in now and talk about what we did. But communication, I think, was – I'll use the 2017 Twins. That was one of my favorite teams I've ever played on because we had – I mean, everybody was always together. We had nobody that was out for, for bad blood. There was no hidden agendas. Literally every single person on that team was playing for everybody. If that guy didn't get it done, dang it, I didn't get it done, but I guarantee the next guy was. It was having that type of mentality and just that team approach. Everybody wants to have great individual seasons. But if you really can focus on what the team needs you to do at that exact spot, you're going to find out more times than not, you're going to have those great individual seasons. And just everybody pulling for everybody. It was so much fun to come to the park every single day because nobody was ever in a bad mood. We might lose by 10 runs, but to be able to flush it just like that, to where in the past that organization hadn't been able to do that, right? You know what I mean? They let it linger, and then the next thing you know, they're on a 6 or 7 game losing streak, as opposed to joking about it, having fun. Because you got to remember, guys, we're playing a game. Whether you get paid for it or it's for high school or little league, you get to play a game. You have to have fun with it. Yes, it is our job. It was our job for a long time, but you and I both had a ton of fun doing it. And you know what? Any day you get to step foot on a baseball field and have fun is an incredible day.
Right. No, that's totally true. And that needs to not get lost in everything else, that you need to have fun doing it. And I think it's great. Like, the more people I talk to, when they answer that question, it's like the best teammates they've been a part of, or the best leaders, were people that looked outward, not inward. And it's hard. I know at times it can be hard, especially when, even though it's a team game, you're still based on what you do individually.
Right.
So, but to be able to have that where you genuinely care about someone else and you're wanting the best for the team, I think when you have a whole group of guys that have that same mentality, then things can become special,
Absolutely.
And I think that's really cool. So now the last question I want to leave you with is, like, do you have what is one piece of advice you'd give someone who is just kind of starting their journey, that's in youth baseball, that wants to play in the major leagues someday?
Yeah, I think one of the best ways to put this would just be, you're your best coach, right? Like, nobody knows you like you know you. And I think a lot of times people can get labeled very, very early on. I think I was, especially. I was labeled as a backup or a super utility type. And, I fought my entire career to kind of shake that label. And I think the fact that I just didn't give up. There were plenty of hard times in my career, but I always use those as motivation to move on. And I think, if you can do that, you're going to find yourself, whether it's in life or baseball or whatever, sport or career path you choose, if you can use those trials and tribulations to learn from and to motivate you, you will succeed in every single thing that you do. So I always used it as, like, I don't take no for an answer, but I think, a better way of putting it is to continue to just have that faith in yourself and just know that if this is something that you really want to do, you're not giving up on that dream. You know what I mean? And continually working every day to make that dream come true.
Gosh, well, that's so great. I mean, all the stuff you said today was outstanding. And I know that there's going to be a lot of people that are able to take what you talked about and, help the young kids, help people kind of develop their own path. And so that was so awesome. I mean, I know we touched on a lot. We talked about a lot. Is there anything else that you want to add that maybe we didn't touch on? Or
Man, we did talk about a lot.
Well, I don't know. I just want to thank you.
What I can tell everybody is you're looking at one of the best teammates you've ever seen right there. That's for darn sure.
Well, I appreciate it. I really do. I thank you so much. And thanks again for your time. I know it's precious.
Absolutely.
And, hey, maybe we'll see you on the road next year, coaching on the Major League staff with the Dodgers.
You better come say hi.
Oh, I will for sure. And it'll be kind of fun to see you on that side of it. So hopefully you enjoy being in the dugout and working on that side. But it was great talking to you. Thank you so much for your time. We appreciate it.
Absolutely. It was my pleasure. And anytime, you guys, if you ever need anything, please feel free to contact. And, I'm here for everybody, just like Doug is. So it was a pleasure talking with you guys, and I really appreciate the opportunity.